If you're as popular as I am, then at Easter you will get given tons of eggs, all of these little eggs everywhere, and they're so hard to organise, and you want little pots for them, but you don't have them. And so today I'm going to be showing you how to crochet this Easter basket. It's adorable and it's really quite easy and will really help the organising situation. Here is one of the Easter baskets that I made earlier. So to make this Easter basket, you are going to need a pair of scissors, a 4mm crochet hook, and the colour of your choice, which I'm going to be using pale brown. To start off, we're going to have to tie a slip knot. And then we're going to insert that onto our hook. Now, we're going to do 2 chains. And we're going to make a circle for the base of the basket, which means we're going to do 6 single crochets into the first chain. By doing 6 single crochets into the first chain, we basically overload the space in that first chain, which forces all of the stitches to wrap around into a circle, as you can see, and we end up with a nice circular base for the basket which we're crocheting. For our next row, we're going to continue the base, and we're just going to try and make it nice and flat and big, and so we're going to do an increase stitch in each of the single crochet stitches we have. So we're going to do 6 increase stitches. To do an increase stitch, you insert the hook and you do a normal single crochet stitch, and then you do another single crochet stitch in the same hole. That results in 2 single crochets coming out from 1 stitch, meaning you've turned 1 single crochet into 2. We're then going to do that 5 more times. And you should now have 12 stitches going around the circle. At this point, I'm going to grab some marker wool. This is just a short bit of black wool that I'm going to use to mark the beginning of my rows. That means I don't have to count the stitches, I can just see when I return to the beginning of the row. So to mark the beginning of the row, we're just going to grab the wool and put it at a cross underneath where we're going to do our next stitch. So you will have some wool going out the back and then some coming out the front. Just tuck it out of the way, as you can see, like that. So for our next row, we're going to do a repeated pattern, and we're going to repeat it 6 times, which will bring us back to the beginning. That pattern is going to be 1 single crochet and 1 increase stitch. So we're going to do a single crochet into the next stitch, and then an increase into the next one. And we're going to repeat that 5 more times. So a single crochet, and then an increase. And a single crochet, and an increase. And we're just going to keep doing that. And now we have reached our marker wool again, meaning we have completed that row. We're now going to get the wool and pull it back so it goes behind the crochet, and you can see it's just looping around and created a little mark there to mark the beginning of the row. So for our next row, we're going to do another pattern, but this time we're going to do 2 single crochets and an increase instead of 1. This will mean we also do this pattern 6 times. So we're going to do 2 single crochets, it's 1 single crochet, and there's the second single crochet, and then an increase stitch into the next stitch. And we're going to repeat this until we get back to the beginning. So that's 2 single crochets, and then an increase. And now we have reached the marker again, so we're going to bring the wool, and this time we're going to pull it forward so it comes out the front of the crochet, and that's just going to keep the mark going. And now we're going to do the final base row. So for this row, we're going to again do another pattern, and you might be able to guess what it's going to be, but this time we're doing 3 single crochets and an increase, and we're going to repeat that 6 times. So we're doing 1, 2, and 3 single crochets, and then we do an increase stitch. And we repeat that until we get back to the beginning. And we have now reached the end of the final base row. So once again, we're going to bring the marker wool behind our crochet, and we're now going to start the walls of the basket. So just so I can show you what we've done, we have done the base of the basket, and we're now going to start up the walls. Now, one of the things I wanted to make this basket be able to do is stand up nicely, because you do get rounded baskets, but I wanted it to have a very straight, flat base so it can stand up. So to do that, obviously we've crocheted outwards to get a relatively flat base. It's not perfectly flat, but it does the job. But then you can see this ridge I have going around the edge. This ensures that the basket will be able to stand up, and we need to leave some crochet to be able to be picked up so that we can add that on afterwards. That might not make sense, but it will very shortly. So for our next row, we're just going to be doing a normal single crochet row. We're actually going to be doing 7 normal single crochet rows, so it'll be a bit tedious, but it'll be great when it's done because we'll have the basket. For this row, however, we're not just going to insert the hook and do a normal single crochet row like you would any other, because we do need to leave something to be picked up so we can make the ridge. So what we're going to do is, we're going to insert the hook only into the top half of the stitch and do a single crochet. So I have the nice attractive looking side facing downwards, And the stitches, you want the stitches on the attractive side to be the ones that are left. Because you can see we've kind of got a nice looking side and then a rough looking side. The rough looking side will be the inside of the basket. And it's the stitches, it's the half of the stitch which is near the rough looking side that we want to pick up. So I hope that's clear, and if it's not, then just watch what I do and copy. So I'm going to insert into the top half of the stitch and do a single crochet. And we're going to do this all the way round until we get back to the beginning, where the marker is. As you can see, it's leaving us with this lovely ridge here, which in itself makes it have quite a nice flat bottom, but we will be adding to that if you want to at the end. Obviously it's your choice, but I will anyway. So, I'm just going to do this single crochet row until we get back to the marker. And that is the first single crochet row complete. So, you can see we've reached the marker. We're just going to bring our marker wool forward, so it's coming out the front of the crochet again. And then we're going to continue. However, now we have done the first single crochet row, we're just going to single crochet like normal. So that means we're going to be picking up both of the loops of each stitch. We don't want to be leaving any ridges on this row. And that is row 2 complete, so we're going to bring our marker wool back over, and this time it's going to go out the back of the crochet. And we're going to do 5 more rows from this point. So we've done 2 rows out of the total, which was 7, which means we have 5 more rows to do. Each time you get back to the marker, bring the wool over to the other side, so if it's pointing out the backwards, just bring it over to point to the front. And as I say, that leaves us with this kind of trail, which just lets you see the beginning of the row. If you're counting your stitches, obviously you don't have to worry about that, but we have 5 more rows of single crochet. And we have now completed the 7 rows. This means the majority of the basket is now complete. We just need to do the frill around the edges, should you wish to do that, and the handle. And the base. Of course, I forgot to add the ridge onto the base. So, to do the frill, you don't have to do the frill if you don't want the frill. You don't have to do it. You can just leave it with this nice, neat top. But to do the frill, we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch. So that means you simply insert the hook, you pull a loop through, and then you pull that loop straight through the loop you have at the moment. And now what we're going to do is, we're going to chain 2. We're then going to do a double crochet stitch into the next stitch. So to do a double crochet stitch, you wrap the wool around the hook, you then insert the hook into the stitch, pull one loop through, and then you pull a loop of wool through the 2 loops, and you keep 2 more on the hook, and you pull the wool through the final 2. So I will undo that and repeat it for you, so you can see me do that again. So we have the 2 chains. Now we're going to wrap the wool around the hook, and insert the hook into the next stitch. We're going to pull through 1 loop, and then we're going to pull a loop of wool through 2 of the loops, and then we're going to pull another loop of wool through the final 2 loops. Now we're going to do 2 chains, and we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch. So this stitch here is where we did the double crochet. We're now going to slip stitch into the one to the right. So we're going to insert the hook in there and pull it through. We're now going to slip stitch into the next stitch and repeat the loop that we've made. So the chains and the half double crochet will make this kind of arc, this bubble if you will, and that will just fold down and make the frill. So we're going to repeat that, which means we do 2 chains, we do our double crochet, and then we do 2 more chains and slip stitch into the next stitch. And there we have another one of these frills. So we're now going to repeat those 3 steps all the way around the basket. So I'm just going to go one more time over it. We slip stitch into the next stitch, we do 2 chains, we do a double crochet, we do 2 more chains, and then slip stitch into the next stitch. So yes, repeat that until you get back to the beginning. And that is the final frill. So we have now reached the beginning, and you can see the frills going all the way around the basket. As I say, these should naturally just fold down, kind of fold over, and they give the basket a nice feel. So now we're going to cut the wool, and I'm going to cut it with a reasonable length, probably about the length of my hand. Go about there. And this can be used later to sew on the handle. We may not need it, but I'm going to cut it there so we have it anyway. And then I'm just going to pull the wool all the way through the loop and pull it tight. And that will just ensure the crochet doesn't unravel. The marker wool can be pulled out, because we do not need that anymore. And that leaves us with a nice and neat basket. We're now going to do the ridge on the bottom before we finally do the handle. For the ridge on the bottom, you want the bottom of the basket facing towards you, and then you want to choose somewhere which is not where the row ends. Here you can see the row ends because we've got half of the stitch left all the way up here, and then one row below it's down there. That's because we're working on the round and the rows will not line up perfectly. I'm not sure if you can see perfectly what I mean, but you should be able to see it on your own where the lines do not match up. We're not going to start there because doing this ridge will cover up that gap. What we're going to do is start slightly to the left. So I'm going to insert my hook. You want the hook facing upwards towards the top of the basket. And I'm going to pull a loop of wool through that stitch. And now we're going to act as if this is just any normal crochet, except we're going to slip stitch. I'm going to insert the hook into the next half stitch and just do a slip stitch. And then I'll put it into the next one on the ridge and do a slip stitch. Now you don't want these slip stitches to be too tight or it will pull the bottom of the basket in, so I'd focus on making them slightly loose. I am naturally quite a tight crocheter, so you want to make them on the looser side, whereas if you're naturally loose, then that's okay. And we're just going to go all the way around the basket, slip stitching on the ridge until we get back to the beginning. And now we have reached back to the beginning. And there you can see it's just given a nice flat profile to the base of the basket. We're going to cut the wool nice and short. You don't need much at all. And then we're going to pull it through the loop. Just pull it nice and tight. Now you can see we have the wool from where we started. That may be too short for you, or you may have tucked it in as you crocheted. I, on the other hand, have not, so I'm just going to tie a knot for these two, and that will just keep everything nice and neat. Now we'll come to neatening up the bottom in a bit. But if you want to just pull the threads in, just kind of weave them in and out of the crochet, you can do that now. We're going to get back to that later. So now we just have one more thing to do, and that is the handle. For the handle, we're going to make this separately and then sew it on. So I'm going to tie a slip knot, and we're going to chain 25 chains. And there is 25 chains. We're now going to do one more chain, but this chain will just allow us to start our row. So we're going to do one chain. Now we're going to go into the second chain from the hook. So that's not this chain, but it's this chain here. And we're going to do 3 single crochets into that one chain. And now we're going to single crochet up the rest of the 24 chains. And we have now got to the end of the chains, and we've already done 1 single crochet into the last chain. We're going to do 2 more single crochets into that stitch. So just like on the other side we had 3 single crochets in the first one, we're going to have 3 single crochets in the last one as well. Now we're going to do 3 more single crochets into that same stitch. So I know this is slightly confusing, but we're going to have 6 single crochets in that last chain. But this time we're going to turn our crochet around because we're going to work up the other side of the chain. So we're going to start off by doing 3 single crochets into the last chain. And now we're going to single crochet up the other side of the chains. Essentially we're making a very long oval, and we're just going to do this until we get to the end of the row. And we have now just done the single crochet into the final chain, and that means we've already done 1, and so we're just going to do 2 more single crochets into the final chain, meaning there's 6 single crochets in the first and the last chain for the handle. So now you can see we have quite an attractive looking handle. It's not just an ordinary chain or a few rows. Now we're just going to cut the wool. Make sure you have a fair amount so we can sew using it. And we're going to insert the hook into the next stitch and just do a slip stitch and also pull the wool through. That just keeps it nice and neat. Now, on my basket handle here, you can see that there's a slight difference. This one you can see the dots in the middle, whereas this one you cannot. This one is also firmer than the one we've just made. I'm going to show you how to add the bit to the middle, making this one firmer and, in my opinion, more attractive. However, if you want to leave your handle looking like this, you can just do that. So to add the center onto the handle, we're going to insert the hook into the circle at the end of the chain. So where we did the 6 single crochets and where we just finished, we're going to insert the hook through that hole there. We're then going to pull a loop of wool through that hole, and then what we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch up the center column. So you can see the holes running along the center. We're just going to go across to the next one and pull a loop through, and then pull it through the loop already on the hook. And we're just going to repeat that all the way across the hook, all the way across the handle. And you can see it just runs a chain along the middle. And we have got to the final loop, and so at the final loop we just do a normal chain, and then again we cut wool, but you can cut the wool with a decent amount, again because we may want to use it for sewing in the end. So then we just pull the wool, pull it tight, and you can now see the handle does not have the holes in the middle and it is much firmer. So now we can get the basket and the handle, and we have to sew them together. You want the part of the handle where we've just done the chain to be pointing upwards. We then see where this edge circle is. It's your choice whether you sew it with the edge on the outside or on the inside. I'm going to sew it with it on the inside, but it's up to you how you want to sew it. And I'm just going to show you my technique for sewing, but however you wish to sew it is your choice. So remember this string from earlier where we finished doing all of the bumps around the edge? That's going to be my guide to where I join the handle. I'm going to insert my hook just below and pull through this bit of wool from the handle. It's quite hard to explain how to sew, but just bear with me. And we are going to then simply pull the wool in and out of different parts of the handle. As I say, it's quite self-explanatory. You just sew the handle on, and you may want to get a sewing needle to do this. However, I am just going to use the crochet hook and pull it in and out using that crochet hook. And I believe that is enough sewing for that half of the handle. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get the other end of the handle. Make sure the handle is not twisted. You don't want the handle to be twisted like that, unless you want to go for a twisted style, in which case fair enough. But you want the handle to be lying nice and flat. And then we have another bit of string on the end of this side of the handle. Make sure you line the handles up nicely in the middle, again, unless you're not going for that, but generally you want to make sure they're lined up in the middle. So we're just going to pull the wool through and then do a bit more sewing. And there is the handle sewn on. So as you can see, we have lots of wool sticking out all over the place. And so I'm now just going to work through each of the strands of wool and weave them in. I will demonstrate with this strand of wool here. What I'm going to do is insert the hook somewhere quite far away, and then I'm just going to weave the hook in and out of the rows, and then pull the wool through all of those rows, and this simply means the wool isn't going to go anywhere and start unsewing. Once you've done that for a bit, you can just cut the wool right next to the crochet and it will blend in. So I'm going to do that now for all of the loose strands. And there we have the completed basket. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, please like and subscribe, and make sure to comment down below how you found the tutorial and also if there's anything else you would like to see me make. This basket was one of my more complicated things, and it's along my Easter theme, and I have also made a tutorial for an Easter egg and an Easter chick if you want to go and explore more. Thanks for watching.